I was thinking about these three people who died this past year, this past school year, and I talked to the family and asked if I could share some things about them, about their lives, and I always like to get permission before I share things about people personally. And at my previous parish, there was this man named Mike, and I did Mike's wedding. Actually, it turned out that I had done Mike's wedding at the parish before that I was at, and that he had moved, and then lo and behold, I show up at my new parish, and there's Mike, Mike has a wonderful wife and 4 beautiful children, and he would go to 7 o'clock Mass every Sunday, the business Mass, because there's no music, we mean business. And Mike would go, and one particular Sunday, Mike came to me and broke the bad news that he had colon cancer. And I watched him as he got chemo, and then he got chemo, and then he got some more chemo. And in all of this, he was more concerned about his family, his wife and his children, than he was about himself. And I watched as he suffered, and I could see in Mike Christ in his suffering and in his dying. There was this boy named Caleb, and when he was 12 years old, he found out that he had stage 4 cancer in his leg. And he couldn't, it was the end of the school year last year, and he couldn't go to school with all this, but he was determined. He went back to school this past year to be with his classmates. He loved his friends and his family. And even though he was only 12 years old, I could see Christ in him. There was this priest, Bob, and he's from the St. Louis Archdiocese, and he was a missionary priest in Bolivia. And I didn't know him as well, but the things I did know of him, he was a character, and he really didn't get caught up in the little things. He was a missionary. He saw the big picture. You know, he didn't get caught up in the minutiae of the Mass. As long as he had bread and wine, he was good to go at Mass. He didn't get caught up in the details. And I could really see in him Christ. Christ didn't care about these little things. He saw, he was a person who saw God in others. And he got the coronavirus, and he died just this Friday. Now, from these, we hear in the story what is basically going on in the gospel is that these 2 disciples are walking away, hopeless and disappointed in Jesus. And they're going back to their old way of life. And we can be that way when we hear about these 3 people. But I saw something much deeper in these 3 people. I saw Christ in them. I seen Christ living in them. I seen Christ suffering in them. And I saw Christ in their death. Why is it always that we see God more clearly in people after they have died? Why is that? Some people get upset at me in my ministry because I tend to see God in everyone. And I see it especially in those who have died. And some people think that maybe I'm Pollyannish, that God is somebody who's far away, unattainable, and can't be so close to us in his suffering. But I believe in the incarnation. And I believe in God in the flesh, in those we meet. And in this story, Christ was hidden from these two disciples as they walked along. And so it is in our life that Christ is hidden in the people that we walk along with. And just like for those three, that as we walked with them, that Christ might have been hidden, that we didn't see it clearly, so is it that he is hidden in the resurrection, that we don't see the resurrection per se. But the truth of the matter is that Christ is risen with them too. Didn't just live and die, but also rises with them. That we were meant to live in Christ. Why does it take us so long to recognize Christ like those disciples? The challenge is to see Christ now. To see Christ in the people that are around us now. To see it in their joy and the good that is in them, and even the not so good in their woundedness. Can we not only see God in them and be about pointing that out to them, but also see Christ in ourselves, in our suffering? The reality is we might think that, oh, these other people are suffering, but we all suffer. And Christ is living in each and every one of us, hidden. The challenge is to see that now. And the disciples in that story, they went off in the other direction, determined that God was somewhere else, and yet God was right there with them and with their friends back in Jerusalem. I have found in my grief that, and I don't mean to say that Christ isn't in the one that I loved, but I tend to put all my eggs in one basket and only see Christ in that person that has died. And what I really need was to not only see Christ in them, but to see Christ in my friends at that time. What I needed was, there was a big gape in my whole, a big gaping hole in my life with that loved one gone. And I needed Christ, not only in that person that died, but also in all those people around me. I needed that more. I needed more friends in that time. At first I ran away from that. But I found that I needed Christ. I needed somebody who was going to listen to me, who was going to be Christ, that had gone before me in grief and knew how to listen and just be there for me. To see that Christ is much greater, that Christ is in my loved one and also in all the people around me. That's what you call church. We need more church in our grief. And not, I don't mean that we need more ritual. We need more people that can point out Christ to us. that can be Christ to us. That we can begin to share how that loved one was Christ to us. And to in turn begin to spread that joy to other people, as the disciples did. As they actually went out, they can no longer contain that truth just to themselves, but they had to share it with others.